Welcome back. So now just to start with our first concept, where we'll be looking at how this electricity is generated and using the various alternative ways of generating this electricity. So first of all, we know that we are generating this electricity at a power station. So at a power station, which is also called a power plant, a generator is used to generate electricity. So at this power plant or at this power station, we are going to be using a generator to generate this electricity. So most power stations in South Africa, they use fossil fuels, and then those fossil fuels, they are either coal, oil, and other natural gas, and also the natural gas. These are used to supply houses and factories with electricity. So the coal that is used, the oil that is used, and even the natural gas that is used, it is used to supply houses and factories with electricity. So radioactive fuel is also used for electricity generation at a nuclear power station, which is what we have also somewhere in Cape Town, which is known as the nuclear power station known as Koeberg. Furthermore, the functioning of a power station, so how does this power station function? The functioning of a power station is based on the following procedures. That number one, the fuel, for example, coal. Remember we said that we can either use coal, we can use oil, or even use the natural gas. So in this case, this example is based on coal. We are going to be burning this coal, and then by so doing, steam is going to be produced in a boiler, or we can refer to that as a kettle. The higher pressure, higher temperature steam moves across the blades of a turbine. So as it is moving across these blades of this turbine that we have here on this picture, the energy of the steam spins the turbine. So as this gas, it is moving and then going into the turbine, it is going to be spinning that turbine that we are seeing in that picture. So that turbine, as it spins, it is also going to be spinning the generator. So as the turbine spins, the generator is also going to be spinning, which is going to be caused by the spinning of the turbine. The generator generates electricity, which is now the mechanical, which is now in terms of the movement, kinetic energy into electrical potential energy. So as this generator, it is moving or rotating, it is going to be generating this electricity. And remember, it is going to be transported through the power lines via the pylons and into the city or the factories or even the houses that we have around us. So that electricity that we are using, remember we have said it is generated by the generator that we find in a power station. So this electricity is going to be distributed by high voltage. It is going to be distributed by high voltage cables and thereby supply the houses and factories. So what's very important to note here is this, that this current or this electricity is going to be distributed by high voltage cables. So we need to know why we are using the high voltage cables. So the steam is then condensed back into water into cooling towers. So now, as this steam is converted, is cooled back by the condenser in the cooling towers, the process is going to start all over and over again. Why we're going to start back again by burning the coal, and then the steam being produced will turn the turbine. As the turbine turns again, it turns the generator. As the generator turns, it produces that electricity via the power lines into the factories and also the houses. So that process keeps on going on over and over again. So now, what are then the disadvantages of using this coal as we have made an example of? So approximately 90% of South Africa's electricity is currently generated through the burning of coal. So approximately 90% of what we are using on a daily basis, our electricity, it is generated through the burning of coal. And remember that coal is a non-renewable resource. So coal is reasonably abundant in South Africa and it is the cheapest energy source. However, there are numerous disadvantages which are associated with the burning of coal. Remember, we have said that coal is a non-renewable resource. So over time, if we keep on using this coal over and over again, there's going to come a point whereby we do not have any coal to generate electricity with. Now, Coal, it consists primarily of the element carbon. So coal primarily consists of the element carbon, but also contains impurities such as sulfur. So during a combustion reaction with oxygen gas, or such gases such as carbon dioxide, so when this coal it is combusting with a gas known as oxygen, gases such as carbon dioxide, as you know, it's our CO2, the sulfur dioxide, which is our SO2, and nitrogen dioxide, our NO2, those are going to be formed. So during that combustion reaction, 1, 2, 3, those gases, they are going to be formed. So these oxides, as you can see from their name, they are all oxides. We have carbon dioxide, it's an oxide, sulfur dioxide, it's an oxide, and then also the nitrogen dioxide. So all of them, they are all oxides. So these oxide gases dissolve in rainwater and moisture in the air to form acid rain. So remember, as these gases are produced, they go into the atmosphere, and as they go into the atmosphere, they're going to dissolve in the rainwater and the moisture that you are finding in the atmosphere. And by so doing, we are going to be having something called the acid rain. So those are now some of the disadvantages of using our coal as our main source of generating electricity. So carbon dioxide, as we've said, CO2, it is also a greenhouse gas, and that is released into the atmosphere in large quantities. And remember, once it is released in large quantities, it is going to cause what we know as global warming. So remember, we've said that coal is a non-renewable resource. So coal is a non-renewable resource, as we have said, and it is getting rapidly depleted. So over time, you're going to get to a point whereby now we no longer have any other source, or in terms of, in this case, coal, we no longer have coal to use to produce the electricity. So it's very much important that you find other alternative sources of electricity. Now, seeing that coal is a non-renewable resource, and over time, we're going to get to a point whereby now we no longer have any more coal to use to produce electricity. So it's very much then important to find other alternative sources of energy. Now, besides coal, there are alternative sources of energy that can be used to drive turbines and generators. That's now including 1, water, wind, solar, and nuclear. Remember, we have said water can be used to generate electricity. So now, each of those ways that we can use to generate electricity has both the advantages and the disadvantages. So let's start now looking at each individual of them, each and every one of them individually. So starting with the hydroelectric power plant, which is now using hydro coming from water. Therefore, what are then the advantages of using the hydroelectric power plant? The functioning of a hydroelectric power station is based on falling water, causing a turbine to spin. So as this water is falling from either a dam, a river, it is going to cause a turbine to spin. And remember, once the turbine spins, it is going to also spin the generator. And once that generator spins, it is going to then produce the electricity, which is then going to be transported by the power lines into the factories and houses. So we have said as the turbine spins, the turbine in turn will spin a generator in order to generate the electricity. So the main advantage of this is there is no fuel that is required to spin the turbine, and therefore no pollution which is going to be caused from the spinning of the turbine by that water. So that then means hydroelectric power is a renewable energy source. Remember, we will always going to have water, and we are not using this water just once. We keep on using the very same water over and over again to generate the electricity. So what are then the disadvantages of using the hydroelectric power plant? So South Africa, unfortunately, it is a dry country without many rivers and high-lying water sources for the generation of hydroelectric power. So because our country, it is dry, we do not have a lot of rivers or any high-lying water sources that we can use. Remember that this is based on the falling water. So if we don't have high-lying water that can fall onto a turbine, we are then unfortunately unable to use this hydroelectric power plant to the way that it's supposed to be used. So we also know that dams are expensive to build. they also have a significant impact on the environment and also on local communities. So those are the disadvantages of using the hydroelectric power plant. So then now, let's look at wind. If you can't use the hydroelectric power plant, probably then we can use wind. Now, with regards to wind, what are then the advantages? In wind-driven electricity generators, a strong wind is going to spin the rotor blades of the turbine. And remember, once the turbine spins, the generator is going to spin and therefore produce electricity. So the rotor blades are up to 50 meters long and spin slowly. Gears are therefore used to spin the turbines fast enough to generate electricity. The turbine in turn spins the generator, as we have said, to generate the electricity. And again, no fuel is going to be used, and also no pollution will occur when we are using the wind. And also the wind power is a renewable energy source. Now, as with all the others, we are going to look at the disadvantages of using the wind power. So wind turbines or windmills are huge and expensive. Massive areas of land are required for the erection of wind farms. And no electricity can be generated on windless days. So we do know that on days where there's no wind, we are then therefore not going to be able to generate electricity, because with this wind power, we need wind to generate electricity. Even the name itself suggests that we need wind. So about 1,000 wind turbines are needed to generate the same amount of energy as modern power plant running on coal or other fuel. So for us to generate the same amount of energy that we are using, we need 1,000 windmills rather. And remember, those require a large space of land, of which we do not have. Now, looking at solar, if we can't use wind, we also can't use water, probably then we can use the sun, which is our solar power. So what are then the advantages of that? So solar power can be generated by using large solar panels to convert the sun's radiant energy into an electrical current. A solar panel consists of many solars. Sunlight consists of small packages of energy, and those packages of energy are called photons. And when they hit a solar cell, electrons are released from the atoms in the cell. So then the conducting wires are then connected to complete the circuit in which the electrons move, and in this way electricity is going to be generated. And as you can see, there is no fuel that was used, and therefore no pollution is going to be caused. Then what are then the disadvantages of using the solar power? The materials that is needed to construct a solar panel, they are dangerous pollutants. And continuous sunshine is needed. Solar power cannot be generated in cloudy or rainy weather conditions. Just like the wind, on windless days we can't generate electricity. On these ones again, when we have a cloudy day or a rainy weather condition, we are not then going to be able to generate electricity. So solar power cannot be effectively generated in all parts of the world, nor can it be generated at night. So we can only generate the solar power only during the day, because once night comes, therefore we no longer have the sun that is going to be used to generate that electricity. And lastly, the last disadvantage is that the equipment needed for generating solar power is expensive. So for us to be able to build all of these solar panels, we are going to be needing a lot of money to buy the parts that are needed. And then lastly, the last alternative source of energy being the nuclear power. So we can't use water, if you can't use water and we can't use wind, and therefore also cannot use the sun, can we then be able to use the nuclear power that we can use, that is found in the Western Cape, as we have said? We do know that South Africa has one nuclear power station, and we have said it's in Koeberg in the Western Cape. It is the only nuclear power station in Africa. So in the entire Africa, we only have just one nuclear power station, and it is found right here in South Africa in the Western Cape. A nuclear power station uses radioactive elements. For example, it is using radioactive uranium as fuel. And we do know that radioactive substances, they can cause cancer. So also, that's now one of the disadvantages of using the power or the nuclear power. So then how does it operate? The operation of a nuclear power station The radioactivity of uranium leads to nuclear power fission, and this is accompanied by the release of large amounts of heat or thermal energy. The heat is then transferred to a cooling medium, for example, water. So remember, we do know that even when using the coal, we used water as our cooling medium. Even in this case, they are using water as their cooling medium. So that water, it flows through the reactor. Seawater is used to cool the radioactive steam. So that radioactive steam is cooled by the water that is our seawater running. Obviously, hence it is built in the Western Cape because there's an ocean nearby. So the heating of water produces steam. We do know that when you heat water, water vapor is going to be produced there in a form of steam. The steam is used to drive a turbine, as in the case of coal power station. And remember, once the turbine spins, therefore the generator is going to be spinning. And once the generator spins, there's going to be the generation of electricity. Then the electricity that is generated by nuclear energy is called nuclear power. So we have looked at the 4 ways in which we can use to generate electricity other than coal. We also looked at the advantages and also the disadvantages of each of those ways of producing electricity. So before moving on to the next set of our concept, we're just going to quickly go for a short break, and I will see you just after this.